Hello, this is William Abel, and this is Common Sense. I'd like to thank GCD Network for helping sponsor this program. Uh, if you'd like to help offset the cost of the show or to help donate money into my next congressional bid for 2026, you can do so at the Cash App. That's $Able TX31. Once again, that's $Able ABEL TX31. So there's a lot that's been going on today. We're going to get into all that. We're going to talk about the executive orders that Trump has signed so far, some of the other ones that he's planning on signing, which he's headed to the White House now to sign more. We'll talk about the pardons that Biden has thrown out, uh, and he's put out a lot of them. In reference, Trump, I think, did 250 total his first term. Biden did about 2,000. We'll also talk about the slippery slope with that, and hopefully there'll be some legal challenges to them. And we're also going to talk about the TikTok ban, which, if you know, I'm sure many people know, but TikTok's been kind of given a stay for right now. So we'll start out with the TikTok, and then we'll move into the events from the day. So the government had decided that TikTok was a threat because the Chinese government was using it to collect personal data from American citizens, which I find this pretty laughable, especially when we've had multiple leakers come out and talk about how the U.S. government spies on us, the American citizens. Uh, Realistically, Facebook's done this. Twitter's done this. Every social media app has done this, where they collected your personal data, and they hide in the user agreements and everything that nobody ever reads. But they don't care about that, because at the heart of the whole issue is with Facebook, as we've seen in the past, the government can control Facebook. They can control Twitter. They were able to control a lot of these other sites. They were not able to do that so much with TikTok, and that is where the heart of the problem lies. The government wants to control the narrative. They want to control the media. I mean, we see that all you got to do is turn on CNN, NBC, or any of these other networks, and you'll see how the government's controlling it. Seems like they took a page out of China and North Korea's playbook. They want their narrative taught, and even with the education, which we'll begin in the Department of Education here in a little bit. And they don't teach children to think for themselves and do research to come up with their own conclusions anymore. They tell children what to believe, what to think, and then they tell them to go out and find any kind of evidence to support that narrative. And I've seen it myself. I mean, so I got firsthand experience with this. I believe I was in 10th or 11th grade when they start kind of going over that way. You weren't allowed to go ahead and decide what you believed, or, put forth an argument for what you think. It was, no, you need to believe this. This is right.
Go ahead and roll the
now prove why this is right, and the other side is wrong. And basically, they teach people to just blindly believe the media, blindly believe the government. The government's always going to have your best interests at heart and everything, but they don't. And one thing with TikTok was, whether you loved it or hated it, it don't matter. But people were given a voice. They could actually say what they wanted to say without really having to deal with too much censorship. And I mean, hey, if China's collecting personal data from people, by all means, let the American people know, and let them make their own decision. The good, the bad, the ugly. That's a great thing about being free, if we were actually truly free. But with TikTok, you had a lot of the narratives that the government was trying to push out there being counteracted. And the government does not like any kind of a they don't want to have to fight and stand on their principles and facts on issues. They want people to just blindly believe whatever they're told. So that's my whole thought on the whole TikTok ban. I think it's ridiculous. I don't really use it a whole lot. I use it on occasion. I used it during my last campaign because it's another method for me to go ahead and be able to get my message out. Now, if the federal government wants to ban TikTok from any government computers, any government phones, I'm okay with that. There's a lot of things you cannot do on government computers and a lot of sites you cannot visit on government computers. But to tell the general American public that you can't go ahead and use that, I'm not okay with. Like I said, anything we do in life, there's risks, and you got to deal with the consequences of whatever actions you decide to take. And the government, well, let's just face it, they don't have our best interests at heart. So those are my thoughts on that. I know President Trump had stated that he wants to go ahead and try and work something out with them. And I believe they got 120 or 180-day extension. I forget exactly what it was. So we'll see what happens with that. And, we'll go from there. But my concern is if an American company takes it over, they're going to go ahead and strong arm them the same way they did with Twitter, the same way they did with Facebook, Instagram, and all these other social media platforms where you suppress dissenting voices, and you go ahead, you only prop up the messages that you want done. And like I said, we seen that in 2020 with the Hunter Biden laptop. If anybody had talked about it, you were banned or your post was automatically removed from the site. And Facebook, I think, was probably the worst out of all of the platforms. They seem to want to try to do away with that now, but actions speak louder than words. So we'll see what happens with it. So today, President Trump officially took office. If you didn't watch his speech, I'd recommend going ahead and looking it up, listening to it. He did not really hold back any punches. He didn't go full on and calling people out by name, but he definitely left some of the former presidents in attendance uncomfortable, to say the least. He definitely called out the Biden and Harris administration and the damage that they didn't have done to our country. And some of the executive orders that he had just signed, because he was just at the Capital One Center in Washington, D.C., and he went up, gave a little speech, and he signed several executive orders. And one of them was overturning a lot of the executive orders that Biden had pushed through. But before Biden left office today, he gave blanket pardons to Dr. Fauci, General Milley, everyone that was on the January 6th committee and their all of the people behind the scenes working on that. And he also pardoned everybody in his family. Now, these are blanket pardons because none of these people have been charged with a crime. None of these people were being investigated for any crime. But it does raise, the issue where pretty much throughout history, if you accepted a pardon, you were basically admitting guilt. So what are these people guilty of that you're throwing a blanket pardon on them before there's any investigation, before there's any crime even mentioned about these people? Now, there's plenty of people that have opinions on crimes that they may have committed, such as Biden and his brother Frank working with Hunter Biden with Ukraine, which Biden had came out in the public and went off and talked about how he threatened Ukraine with aid money if they didn't fire their the attorney looking into Burisma, which was the gas and oil company that Hunter Biden was on the board of, which if, I'm sure everybody knows about that already, but if not, he was given this job on the board for this company, Burisma, with no experience whatsoever. Only thing he had to offer was that he was the vice president's son. And Biden went there and said, hey, if you don't go ahead and get rid of this prosecutor that's looking into Burisma, well, then I'm going home with your money. We're not going to give you the money that we had promised you. Now, this was under Obama's administration when Biden was in charge of dealing with Ukraine at the time. And then a couple hours later, he jokes and he's like, hey, he goes, they went ahead and they fired that son of a bitch and I gave him the money. I mean, it is what it is. It's been out there in the public for years now, and everybody turns a blind eye to it. So he gave blanket pardons to all these people, all his family members, everything else. And like I said, the problem is kind of like with Hunter Biden, how he gave him a pardon for 10 years. Any crimes that he's convicted of now or any that may arise later on down the road. That is way too much power. You're pardoning people that there may be no crimes at all known about, and then all of a sudden you find out that they were serial killer or something. It wouldn't be far stretched because we know there's plenty of people in the government that have committed murders. Some of them have been called, some of them haven't. But I don't trust the government any further. I can throw them. But to go ahead and just allow the government that kind of authority to go ahead and grant pardons to people that are facing no criminal charges, yeah, it's a bridge too far. I did hear some talk today about challenging that and, taking it to the courts, and we'll see what happens with that. So, getting into some of the executive orders, I'm going to read these because some of them, they just came up. So I'm going to read them off of the White House website. If you go to whitehouse.gov, you can go ahead and look at all the executive orders that the president has signed. So right now there's about 2 pages of it. First one is President Trump announces his cabinet and cabinet level appointments. President Trump announces sub-cabinet appointments. President Trump announces acting cabinet and cabinet level positions. Then we got President Trump designates chairman and acting chairman. And flying the flag of the United States at full staff on Inauguration Day. So the reason this was kind of put in there, I think this was put in last minute, is because they were not flying the flags at full staff today. They had them at half staff. And, I got it. They had him at half staff for Jimmy Carter, but his funeral was about a week ago. There's no reason they should have still been at half staff at this point in time. They should have had them all raised up. So he signed that executive order this morning. That was done pretty much right after he was sworn in. Now we're going to go into, I'm going to go into depth a little bit more on some of these other ones here. So first one we got is initial recessions of harmful executive orders and actions. So according to the website, it says, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered as follows. Section 1, purpose and policy. The previous administration is embedded, deeply unpopular, inflationary, illegal, and radical practices within every agency and office of the federal government. The injection of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, into our institution has corrupted them by replacing hard work, merit, and equity with a decisive and dangerous preferential hierarchy. Orders to open the borders have endangered the American people and dissolve federal, state, and local resources that should be used to benefit the American people. Climate extremism has exploded, inflation, and overburdened businesses with regulations. To commence the policies that will make our nation united, fair, safe, and prosperous again, is the policy of the United States to restore common sense to the federal government and unleash the potential of the American citizen. The revocations within this order will be the first of many steps the United States federal government will take to repair our institutions and our economy. Section 2, revocation of orders and actions. The following executive actions are hereby revoked. Executive Order 13985 of January 20, 2021, advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. Executive Order 13986 of January 20, 2021, ensuring lawful and accurate enumeration and appropriation pursuant to the decimal census. Executive Order 13987 of January 20, 2021, organizing and mobilizing the United States government to provide a unified, and effective response to combat COVID-19 and to provide United States leadership on global health and security. Executive Order 13988 of January 20, 2021, preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Executive Order 13989 of January 20, 2021, Ethics Committee by Executive Branch Personnel. Executive Order 13990 of January 20, 2021, protecting public health and the environment and restoring science to tackle the climate crisis. Executive Order 13992 of January 20, 2021, revocation of certain executive orders concerning federal regulation. Executive Order 13993 of January 20, 2021, revision of civil immigration enforcement policies and priorities. Executive Order 13995 of January 21st, 2021, ensuring an equitable pandemic response and recovery. Executive Order 13996 of January 21, 2021, establishing COVID-19 pandemic testing board and ensuring a sustainable public health workforce for COVID-19 and other biological threats. Okay, there's a lot here, so we'll have to go ahead and go over the rest of them later. Otherwise, I'm going to run out of time. But you get the point. So he overturned a lot of the executive orders. And while I do agree with a lot of these executive orders, we got to remember that these can be overturned once he leaves office. The next president we get after Trump can come in with a swipe of a pen, eliminate every executive order he has. So even though these will go ahead and fix the problems while he's in office, we still need to go ahead and contact our congressmen and our senators and have them go ahead and get bills pushed through to actually cement these in a law, as opposed to going ahead and just doing them by executive order. Restoring freedom of speech and ending federal censorship. Ending the weaponization of the federal government. Return to in-person work for federal employees. Regulatory freeze pending review. Hiring freeze for the federal government. Delivering emergency price relief for American families and defeating the cost of living crisis. And putting America first in international environmental agreements. So some of the things here, we're going to be leaving the Paris Climate Treaty. And basically what these executive orders are doing is it ends Biden's executive orders, freeze on regulations, and as I've talked before about the regulations, they're out of control. Just to pick and sell an apple. So if you pick an apple off a tree and you try selling it, there's over 5,000 regulations that govern that. As I've talked before, regulations, basically, you have unelected bureaucrats going ahead and making these rules that are basically law, but they're not held accountable. So they can just do whatever they want. During Trump's first term in office, he had went ahead and got rid of a lot of the regulations. I believe, if I remember correctly, he said that they'd have to delete or they'd have to get rid of 27 regulations for every new regulation they wanted to put in. So I'm excited about that. I'd like to go ahead and see regulations done away with altogether and actually have something where if you want something put in, a regulation, it's got to be voted on by the elected officials. That way we can actually hold somebody accountable for these regulations. Federal hiring freeze, that's not going to extend to the military. So military and a few select federal organizations will be exempt from the hiring freeze, but there will be a hiring freeze, and they're looking to do that until they can go ahead and clean up the federal government, because we all know how corrupt a lot of these federal employees are. Uh, Requirement for federal employees to return full time in person to work. So right now, there's a lot of federal employees that are sitting at home and claiming they're working. But we know even when they actually were going into the office and working, they still weren't actually doing anything. At least nothing beneficial to the American people. Uh, One of the other executive orders is addressing the cost of living and the high cost of inflation and everything, and kind of allowing his people to go ahead and combat it using the full ability of their office to go ahead and combat the rising cost of living. Next one was withdraw from the Paris Climate Treaty, which will save over $1 trillion. And he had pulled out of this before, back in 2017 when he first took office. And then as soon as Biden got in office, he throws right back into it. The problem with that is we actually have very low emissions compared to a lot of other countries. And really, this whole Paris Climate Treaty does nothing if China's not following through with it, if India is not following through with it, because those are two of the largest polluters in the world. But it's costing us a fortune and is really not benefiting us any. Next one was a notice to the UN that we are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty. Restoration of free speech, which, I mean, anybody can tell you that that's been under attack for a long time. It's not like this is something new. And then also ending the weaponization of political witch hunts. So we talked about the pardons Biden gave, and he claimed that was, oh, well, they're going to come after me and my family for political retribution. So basically, everything Biden did while he was in office, he's worried about being done to him. But there was really no indication that was going to happen. If Trump was going to be vindictive, then his first term, he would have went after Hillary Clinton and actually had her locked up for the crime she committed, including the server, Benghazi, and the list goes on and on. He's also going ahead, and in his speech today, when he was at the Capital One Center, he said he was going to go ahead and free the January 6th prisoners. I mean, we all watched it live on TV. We saw that there were some people acting bad. And the sad thing is a lot of them did not go ahead and go to jail. They didn't have to go to court, nothing. They were just left alone. The one that pops into my head, is the most prominent one, was Ray Epps. The FBI has admitted that they had people mixed in with the crowd January 6th. Now, whether those were the agitators or not, I don't know, at least. But there's a lot of theories out there concerning that. So Trump would say he's going to sign up to about 200 different executive orders today. And like I said, the way this works is the executive orders work for the term of your presidency. But if you don't get Congress to back them and to go ahead and actually solidify them in the law, then they're going to be done away with when the next president comes in. We see that's what happened with Biden. That's what happened with Trump after his first term. And it's a cycle that never ends. So we actually need Congress to do their job, which that's going to be like pulling teeth. Everyone, or a lot of people, at least I know, they're excited about Trump taking office again. I think he's going to do some great things. I think he's going to go ahead and, if he can get the Congress to go ahead and work with him, I think we can get a lot of good things done. The problem is, the way I see it is, it's going to end up being a lot like it was in 2017, where there was Republican Senate, there was Republican House, We had a Republican in the White House, but yet they were trying to do business as usual, as they always do, especially with the spending bills and throwing so much money into it that for unnecessary items. Uh, and we've seen that every year. We've seen that under Obama's administration. We've seen that under Trump's administration. We've seen that under Biden's administration. And something needs to change. And when we start going ahead and looking and holding our representatives accountable, Democrat, Republican, Independent, it don't matter. We need to hold them accountable. We're not going to go ahead and break this cycle. So, as I always say, go ahead and look at your representative's voting record. Hold them accountable. If they're not doing what they should be doing, go ahead and find somebody to replace them that will do what needs to be done. But yeah, so I think it's going to be a lot of the same. It's going to be a lot of fighting. A lot of things are going to have to fight tooth and nail to get done. And that's where, like I said, executive orders come in handy because you can get things done, but it's only going to last short term. So you got to get Congress get on board with these policies to pass them. And we'll see how it all pans out. I have little faith. I don't trust Mike Johnson. We seen when he took over, and I know I've heard so many representatives talk about, well, we got the power of the purse, so we're going to go ahead and get something done about the border, and nothing was ever done. But one thing they did do is they made sure they funded Ukraine. They made sure they funded every other country in the world, but they left us high and dry. What good is having the power of the purse if you don't use it? And like I said, I've talked about this a million times. And then we have the Department of Education, which that's like got to be one of the biggest scams in the federal government. Literally, all they do is they go ahead and they make recommendations. They do research. They make recommendations on how to improve education. However, as I've stated a million times here on this show, our test scores are showing anything but an improvement in our education system. I got the numbers here. So let's see. In 2021, there was a test that was done. 72 countries participated, and these were our rankings. So in reading, we were ranked 24th out of 72. We had a score of 498, while the average score was 496. So we scored 2 points above average. The math, we ranked 36 out of 72 countries. We had a score of 481. The average was 494. So we were below average in math. Science, we ranked 28th. We had a score of 497, where the average was 501. So it kind of baffles me how people are getting all upset about getting rid of the Department of Education. And now, reminder, we're talking about getting rid of the Department of Education on the national level. I'm not talking about getting rid of it on the state level. I'm talking about letting the state go ahead and dictate the education and do what they need to do in their state to improve their education without having interference with the federal government and the federal board of education. I honestly think that's wonderful because, once again, as I've stated multiple times, I can't think of anything the federal government has done which has been successful. You know, the VA, Social Security, education, everything the government gets involved in, they destroy. And one last thing before I go, he's also going ahead and putting a freeze on all the additional IRS agents that they had tried hiring on. Well, my time's almost up, but I would like to thank GCD Network once again. I appreciate it. If you'd like to go ahead and help with the campaign or help offset the cost for the show every week, you can go ahead and donate or give a donation at the Cash App above. So until next week, thank you. God bless the United States. God bless Texas. And God bless each and every one of you. Thank you and good night.